Now, in the underwater paradise that is the world of planet 4546b in Subnautica, you can usually tell how much harm a creature can cause you just by seeing what it looks like. I mean, I'm definitely not going to be coming up to a ghost leviathan expecting warm and fuzzy hugs. Today's creature, however, will slightly break that pattern, considering that it looks completely harmless on the surface, but because of its behavior and the way it exists, it might just be one of the most destructive creatures in the entire game. That's right, today we will be talking about the heavily requested floaters. I will be telling you everything we know about these creatures, where on the map you can find them, what they look like, what they behave like, and finally any other interesting points of trivia or theories that I'm able to dig up. Now, as with all of the other Subnautica lore videos, I have to preface this by saying that this might contain spoilers to the main story of Subnautica, and more specifically to its world. So if you haven't had the chance to experience it for yourself and you don't want any of it spoiled, I strongly recommend clicking off the video and coming back to it later. Now, with that out of the way, make sure you strap on some weights, be careful so your sea moth doesn't topple over, and let's go. Now, first of all, when we talk about destructive organisms, we mostly picture something aggressive and predatory, like the sea dragon or the ghost leviathan. However, the floaters are a purely passive, interactive species of fauna, which can mostly be found around the starter areas, those being the grassy plateaus and the safe shallows. However, big colonies can also be found near the floating island, the underwater islands, and the blood kelp zone. Looking at this species, it is also very important to distinguish that there are two main subspecies of the floater, that being the regular organism and the ancient floater. Even though on the surface these appear to be very similar, there are actually some minor differences between what the organism behaves like and what its interaction with the player looks like in the game. But let's start from the beginning. Looking at the floater itself, it is mostly round in shape with a body consisting of two distinct colors, which would be a light, transparent, gelatinous blue coat which surrounds the more core-like pink inner body that is rounded up with what I would presume to be a mouth with a row of small teeth inside. As far as the outer body itself goes, it has several tentacles near the mouth which are used to both attach to objects and presumably help the creature push nutrients towards its mouth, and a bunch of smaller bumps all around its body which are topped off with small white circles in the center. Now, what you may not have known here, because this is only stated in the databank entry, is that the floater is actually a combination of two organisms living in symbiosis, that being the actual floater, which is only the pink body on the inside, and the so-called microorganism membrane, which is the outer gel-like substance that is, according to the PDA, simply a mesh of microorganisms capable of forming a sealed vacuum around the creature's jaws. From that same entry, we also learn that the outer membrane serves as a helium buffer, effectively creating a thin layer of helium around the inner creature, which provides buoyancy both to the floater and to any object it decides to attach to. But now, let's talk about their actual behavior and their life cycle. The floater, by definition, is a parasite, most of the time being found attached to rocks or creatures, which can, depending on the size of the object it's attached to, render it buoyant and floating, or simply restrict the movements if it's something bigger, like a reefback. If released in open water, they will quickly float up to the surface, where they will simply stay until something is near them, and if you release them close to a different creature, they will in fact hone in on it and attach themselves to it, where, again, depending on the size of the creature, they might either take it up to the surface, effectively suffocating it, or simply, if it's a larger creature, restricting its movement. Here, however, we come back to the ancient floaters, as these have shown to have pushed this ability to the extreme, in one case holding an entire island up above the surface, allowing for more complex and advanced plant life to grow on top of it. Now, looking into these more ancient and mature floaters, we can start to learn more about their life cycle. Supposedly, young juvenile floaters will be born near the surface, from which point they will try to submerge down to the seabed and attach themselves to any piece of land, rock, or creature that they can find. Here, the floater will suck in and digest any possible nutrients from its host, and if the particular creature happens to have been asphyxiated at the surface, its body will eventually be consumed and the floater will move on to another target. For the ancient floaters specifically holding the island, it is stated that they have been able to raise a landmass to the surface, being rewarded with a stable and consistent food supply, which eventually allows them to reproduce and begin the cycle again. Working on from that theory, it is also very likely that the ancient floaters that we see holding up the islands are in fact the ones responsible for creating all of the other smaller ones that you can encounter throughout the game. That on its own wouldn't even be that far-fetched, considering that because the ancient floaters have been attached to landmass for theoretically thousands of years and have had a stable diet of plant decay and organic residues as they seep through the rock and into the floater, from what we know, there might not be any real limit to the life cycle of the floater as long as they have a stable supply of nutrients. But now, here might be the moment where you're wondering about the stuff that I said at the start of the video, calling the floater extremely dangerous and destructive if mishandled. So what's all that about? Well, as it happens, the player is able to pick up the floater. Funny enough, it's also the only creature which the player picks up with both hands, and they are then able to either stash it in their inventory or once again release it, attaching it to something else in the world. It is also worth noting that if you end up rubbing up against one of these things, for example in your sea moth, it will most likely attach itself to you on its own. I should also probably mention here that yes, these can attach directly to the player, which will cause them a little bit of damage, namely 10%. So technically you can use these to fight other creatures as well by attaching them on and just waiting for them to suck the life out of them. However, that is a very slow process, and for anything major like a Reaper Leviathan, you would probably be waiting for several weeks of in-game time for it to happen. The problem here is that because of the buoyancy of the floater, even a single one of them attached can cause the sea moth, or unbelievably so, even the Cyclops, to topple over and, depending on the location where you're in, cause you major problems or even destroy your vehicle. Now this is pretty significant, considering even something as massive as the Reaper Leviathan, for example, will on its own not attack the Cyclops and not deal any damage to it. Now of course, this does not mean that the floater is more dangerous than a Reaper Leviathan. I just found it pretty funny, considering that otherwise, it is one of the more peaceful creatures in the game. Now essentially, that is all of the information that we're outright given by the game. However, there are a few more things that I'd like to mention just to end this video off. Now first of all, it is theoretically possible to build your habitat inside of one of the floating island ancient floaters, which will in fact cause them to disappear. However, no, even if you remove all of them with this method, the island will not come crashing down and it will simply remain floating. It is also worth noting that since the days of early alpha, the floaters have actually received quite a significant nerf to their ability to lift objects up, as back in the day, these could very easily be used when attached to your Cyclops if it ran out of power to bring it back to the surface, allowing you to repair it. However, as time went on, this has now become a bit more difficult, and if you still want to pull a feat like this off, you will need to gather a whole bunch of these guys. And finally, I could not think of a better way to end this video than simply using the assessment of the PDA regarding the ancient floaters, which you get by scanning them, that simply states incredible. But with that, I would like to end this video off, and I hope you guys enjoyed it and learned at least something new about the incredible world of Subnautica. If you did, maybe consider leaving a like, commenting, or subscribing. All of those would be very much appreciated. And if there are any facts or theories that I've missed that you would like to mention, please make sure to leave those down in the comments below as well. I would very much like to read them. Also, this video was recorded on a new microphone, so I would love to hear from you guys what you think of the quality. Anyways, I want to wish you all a beautiful rest of the day, and I'll see you in whatever next video I make. Bye bye.